Okay. I wasn't joking when I said I hadn't figured out quite what to say. So I'm going to start. So I guess when I go to sea, I go with all of my history, I go with all of my joys, and I sort of go with all of my troubles, and I go with all of my inspirations, and a lot of come on in. Oh yeah. I go to sea with my inspirations, and I love reading a lot of the things that inspire me. I've drawn from books. I'm going to start with a quote from Moby Dick. I should say, apologies to anyone who came to the stranger thing, because there is going to be a bit of repetition, but you'll get pictures to distract you from the stuff you've heard. Anyway, chapter 1, Moby Dick, call me Ishmael, blah, 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 and there it goes. Whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet, and especially whenever my hypos get such an upper hand of me that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off, then I count it high time to get to sea as soon as I can. So I love this quote I love it because it's funny, I love it because it's a bit dark, and I love it because I relate to it so strongly. When I go to sea, it just chills everything out. So, a couple of years ago, I'd been looking at this boat for a long time. A lot of people had been looking at this boat for a long time, in fact. And I went off with this one Christmas. I did this massive bike ride in southern Patagonia, and I came back all full of adventure. I was slightly locked into a job that I didn't really enjoy, but I came back. And I was cycling to Sainsbury's, and these are actually the back of, I think it was a shredded wheat box, and written on the back, "Serious ocean boat, new blah 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 blah." And I love it. Electronics, mastheads, etc. Go! And in that moment I was like, okay, I'm going to go. So I quit the job, sold a house, bought a boat, just sorted all that. And then that summer, this was I bought a boat in 2016. 2017, I decided to sail to the Faroe Islands. This is the tide atlas for the Faroe Islands, which we photographed in the Harbour Master's office in Stornoway, where they call it the Scare Atlas. Basically, all these red bits, you don't want to go there because you'll die. Green bits is all really exciting scenery, massive, great stuff. Anyway, the other thing that I spent all the money that I couldn't afford on that year was a 3-piece kayak. So this is a Rockpool Taran thing that just clips together like a bit of luggage. But what this means is I can carry it on Sherpa, which is my big boat, and do gnarly paddling trips whilst I'm doing gnarly sailing trips. And I can also wrap it up in cling film so that looks like an Egyptian mummy. Take it on a plane, which is also quite cool. That year, so last year, it was the first year I sort of really stretched Sherpa's legs. Sailed with friends to the Faroe Islands and back. Went west coast of Ireland, out to Hebrides, Faroes, spent a bit of time there and then back. And then I was home for about 5 days, repacked, and then flew out to Canada. And I paddled around Nova Scotia. So it started off as it was going to be two of us started it. In fact, it was this other guy's idea, a Canadian guy. One thing we hadn't got around to do was actually go paddling together before we started this 900-mile journey. And almost as soon as we hit the water, he was going, "Oh, I'm so tired, my clothes are wet." And I was like, "It's not a paddling trip anymore." And so after 2 weeks, it was horrible actually. It was 2 weeks of sort of constant negotiation of shall we do another 5 miles? Oh, I'm so scared, and so it was all really rubbish. Anyway, after 2 weeks, I really didn't have a choice. And I just said that you do it your way, I'll do it my way. And he quit the next day, and I did the next 700 miles on my own. And then paddled it into this really satisfying little slug. Anyway, right, Grayson Perry. I love Grayson Perry for all sorts of reasons. Outfits, I like. But in his so he did the Reef lectures in, I think it was 2013, not sure. And in the Q&A at the end, someone said to him, anyone who doesn't know Grayson Perry, Turner Prize winning artist and potter, he does a lot of pottery. And someone asked him, what's the importance of craft in your work? And he said, well, when you have a skill, you can think in it. And it's always stuck with me, this thing, this idea. And I suppose my skills are, I've got a few skills, but my skills are sea kayaking and sailing. And so when I apply the thinking to those skills, I come up with this idea, which is like, okay, I'm going to sail to Iceland and then paddle around it and then sail back. So that was me applying those thoughts. Just I've got a laser pointer somewhere. Some of you would probably be really good at geography, and others maybe not so much. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a what's what. Just try this out. This is Cornwall. So anyway, we're up here. La 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 la. That's the Isle of Man. La 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 la. That's Mull. Got up here. Is that Mull? Anyway. Al's Hebrides chain here. Totally amazing. Boom. Faroe Islands is there, and then Iceland. So, we'll come back to that. So anyway, I decided to do this trip, and worked really hard over the winter, had no time for anything, didn't do any sailing, didn't do any paddling, and then basically had about 2 weeks to just bodge up all the jobs that I planned to do really properly, and just was like, and did all that, and then it's sort of time to leave. And originally it was going to be a 4-month trip, and 5-month trip, and it's a funny amount of time that, because it's not like just going on a little holiday, but it's also not like moving to a different planet or whatever. But you do end up sort of going, oh, my van's just massively failed its MOT and it's sort of not worth bothering with. So you end up doing this like semi-slash and burn thing. And I just wanted to sort of talk about like departure really. I've always got this idea that I sort of always imagine this utopian dream where you go, all my socks are like ironed, and I never do any ironing, but folded neatly, all freshly laundered, everything's in the right place, and then you're like, I'm ready. I'm going to go. And basically it never works like that. It's always chaos, but it doesn't matter because they have laundries on the way, so you just do your washing later. But anyway, a couple of quotes that I really like. So this is John Steinbeck, Travels with Charlie. John Steinbeck, amazing American author. In his sort of mid-50s, he decided to go on a road trip with Charlie, his French poodle. He got this pickup and did this really cool, one of those pickup caravan things on the back. Anyway, he writes this, which I really like, and I can relate to. In long-range planning for a trip, I think there is a private conviction that it won't happen. As the day approached, my warm bed and comfortable house grew increasingly desirable, and my dear wife incalculably precious. To give these up for 3 months for the terrors of the uncomfortable and unknown seemed crazy. I didn't want to go. Something had to happen to forbid my going, but it didn't. And that is mirrored in the journals of William Morris, who did fabulous textile design and cutlery and everything. Anyway, Thursday the 6th of July 1871, London to Reykjavik. William Morris went up to the Faroe Islands, Faroe Islands and then on to Iceland, did all these amazing travels around Iceland. And so this is his journal on that day in 1871. After a fidgety afternoon, Faulkner and I started from Queen Square in 2 cabs to meet Magnuson there, Evans having gone on before by steamboat from London Bridge. Of course, I felt as if I had left everything behind, yea, as if I myself should be left behind. We found Brown waiting to see us off, but no Magnuson as yet. So we took our tickets, 3rd class, and CJF bribed the guard to keep other people out of the carriage, telling him we would be 5 in number, for Magnuson's womankind were expected to come with him. He was so late that I began to get very fidgety, for through the morning my heart had failed me, and I felt as if I should have been glad of any accident that had kept me at home, yet now it would have seemed unbearable to sleep in London another night. And I just totally get that, because it was like this sort of weird purgatory where you told everyone that you're going to go, and you're like, oh, go. But you also just want to sort of like watch Netflix. And then you go, and it's we hadn't even hit the East Cardinal Manacles story, and then all these dolphins came out. I just loved it. For those of you that don't know, if you're looking out to see Falmouth Bay, and this is just out by the Manacles, and I sort of feel like you go around that and then you're sort of out there. So I left Cornwall with my brother, and we sailed. The plan was to sail. We didn't really have a plan. We just went. But we hit really bad fog off Land's End in the shipping lane, so we ended up just going to Scilly's for a night. Had a night there, a bit of a bimble around St Martin's and everything to it. And then we headed north, got to Ballyholme, which is Belfast to Loch, basically. And then Will had to go home, and then I had this beautiful 2 days on my own. I've never really done any single-handed sailing. I've done this big single-handed kayaking trip and thought that was quite nice. But I was going to meet friends in Oban, so carried on. So I sailed from Belfast Loch to this beautiful little anchorage of this island called Giga. I don't know if you might say it's Giga, I'm not sure. It was lovely. Got my kayak out, paddled around Giga and Cara, which was really nice. First time I paddled in about 5 months, something which is stupid. Watched the sun go down over the patch of Jura there, which is really lovely. Climbed the mast. Okay, Scotland. So there's Oban down there. So I was picking up these 2 friends in Oban here. This is the Sound of Mull, and then we had this weather forecast where it's quite strong southerly winds, and which meant it was going to be we're heading for Mingulay, which is very bottom of the Altipodes chain. And the anchorage there was really exposed in those conditions, but the wind was due to turn to the west. So I picked these friends up, and they never sailed before, really. And I was like, sorry lads, we're going to sail overnight and we're going to do this crossing. And they were like, cool. And so we did. So this is Aidan and Brendan, brothers. And yeah, anyway, we did this crossing. That's me there. Spoiled it now. Yeah, this crossing was, so they've just been like in a van all day and totally knackered. And so we got going, had dinner, like washed up dinner, had a chat, and I was like, oh, have a nap if you want, thinking they'd go and have a sleep for an hour like proper sailors, but they were just like, okay. Tucked up for the night, slept through the whole night. But it was this there was this real moment for me on this trip, and on this crossing, and the wind was really strong. It was this moonless night, not a cloud in the sky, and just like Milky Way overhead, shooting stars going off all over the place, and we were just hitting these patches of phosphorescence that was so thick it was just like the water just glowing green, and then just these pods of dolphin. You had a couple of pods of dolphin coming on, and when they're underwater in phosphorescence, they're just glowing green, and then they dive out and they just go into silhouette. But it was really amazing, and but I also, it was the first time where I just thought, totally got this. Like me and Sherpa, it's like every little creak, I sort of know what she needs, and it's just like little adjustments, and really got massive confidence in the self-steering gear. This here is, this chain is linked to a whirligig that does cool stuff and drives the boat for me so I can go to sleep. So yeah, anyway, that was really cool. And then we arrive at Mingulay. It's an uninhabited island at the bottom of the Outer Hebrides train, and this was the seals on the beach after we'd scared about half of them off. It's just totally amazing, beautiful place. We climbed up to the west side. By this time the wind swung around to the west, and it's just like hammering the sea cliffs on the west side. And huge colonies of fulmars and guillemots, razorbills, puffins, all the gang, basically. And I quite like Brandon's expression here, because it was one of those days where it's like, but really cool. Fulmars, love a northern fulmar, great. So yeah, this is sort of mid-May, I guess. So it's like breeding season. So just kind of like get to know each other. In fact, they're probably not getting to know each other because northern fulmar is a monogamous bird, and they so these guys have probably been together forever. Sweet. There's another one. Okay, yeah. So this is us walking back. You can see Sherpa down there. That little. She's there, and then this big lump came in and just totally messed with our zen. Oh yeah, this, right, so I think, part of what this journey was about, well, that sounds like I had a plan. I didn't really. I was just like, I'm going to go on this massive trip. But, the things that you sort of come home and reflect on is about sort of going to these remote places where there's this sort of connection with, man's relationship with nature runs so deep and is so interlinked that there's this sort of fragility in it where we become part of, in the same way that the fulmar has this, it's perched on this cliff and this monogamous pair of birds lay a single egg in a season, there's these buildings up here, and we live in this extraordinarily hard life out on these wild islands. And basically, there was one day, and I could basically just make up a date, but it would be a lie. But it's somewhere between 1850 and 1950. So pick anywhere on that timeline, and let's just believe it. And basically, all the men went out to sea to go fishing, and there was a big storm, and then just never came back. And then the island couldn't support itself, and so the whole community, the rest of the community was taken off and moved to Barra, and it's no one's ever lived there again, And the same deal on St Kilda, which I haven't been to, but is on the list. But there's something really sort of moving about going to a place like that. And yeah. Oh yeah. So this is the next morning. Wind's dropped down. Aidan and Brendan are both pretty gnarly climbers. And we've sort of gone on a little dinghy mission, like round all the little coves and stuff. And we saw this bit of rock which just looked like it ought to be climbed. So we sort of belayed from the dinghy. So we put like cams in the cliff. Felt really badass. Kind of enjoyed all that. And there's Brendan. And then the next day we moved up to Pave, which was the next one in the chain. There's Sherpa out on the anchorage. And it's another uninhabited island, but it's like a world-class climbing site. So this little weird cluster of tents is just a load of sort of weirdos and misfits who just get dropped down by a fisherman from Barra, and they just climb and eat protein and climb and then eat more protein. And then, eat more protein. Anyway, that's what they do. But anyway, we met someone there and we were like, oh, we've come here and we don't know anything. And they were like, and someone was like, oh, I've got a photocopy. So they just gave us this with all the routes on, which was really cool. This is the Great Arch. So this is this absolutely mega feature. I'd love to say that we climbed it, we didn't, but we went for a look and took some photos. Up here you can see someone who's just having a go. And this, like these guys up here, So you rappel in from here, you come down this crap, and then work your way across here, and then there's all sorts of routes that go up here, but they're like massive multi-pitch routes. There is a route that goes from down here, up here, over this, up this, and over the top, which some crazy American person stuff. But yeah, amazing, and yeah, quite sort of cool, because you know, I'm out there doing all this stuff where people are like, oh, look at that misfitting weirdo on this kayak, or whatever, and then it's like the same people but with a different skill. So they think in this, which is completely alien to me. But just going to point out Northern Falmouth and another one. Love it. Anyway, that's me shitting myself on something that I really do not have the skills for. That's those guys making it look really easy. There was a sort of Belgian team of climbers who were up there, and it was there was bad weather coming in, so the fisherman who takes them all down there leaves them with a VHF radio so he can contact them, because there's no mobile reception. So they'd all got this really disappointing call saying that he was picking them up 2 days early because there was no way that he could get to them otherwise. So they gave us some of their protein. So these were Belgian eggs that have they've been driven from Belgium to Oban, then gone on the ferry to Barrow, and then gone by fishing boat down to Paddock, and then we got them. More about eggs later. So this is my friend Ben's house, caravan thing. So this is on a beach called Cleatch on the west coast of Barrow, and Ben's he's a paddler, surfer, all round outdoorsy sort of guy. And probably can't really see it there, but anyway, his static caravan is like ratchet strapped down to these massive boulders and stop blowing away. And this was the old caravan, which is just hilarious. Anyway, I haven't got a picture of it. Ben's great because he would just give us all this local knowledge and be like, oh yeah, you want to go there? There's loads of scallops, and there were, so we'd be able to scallop. That was nice. And then I think I might have put too many slides in this. Anyway, wiggled away up through the Outer Hebrides chain, got to Stornoway, hung out there and waited for a weather window, and then it's like a 250-mile crossing to the Faroe Islands. And then we got the weather and we went, and off we went. Here's Brendan looking at, I forget the name of it, it's something like Seabirds, I don't know, it's got a funny name. This is this uninhabited, weird, rocky, gnarly island north of the Butt of Lewis. And then to starboard there's North Rona. And these places just totally captivate me, you know, it's kind of, well, what's not to love about an uninhabited island. So then we sailed like this for a bit, and then like that for a bit, and then like that for a bit. This I really love because this was landfall. This is the Faroes. You can just see this sort of faint goings on in there. But it sort of makes me think about the Vikings, you know, and it's like, it's pretty obvious that there's islands there when you look at that weather. It's like, you know, the clouds have just gone, yeah, we're here. I didn't need to be that clever because I just did it all on an iPad. But anyway, that's that. Faroes is, like, landfall is pretty mega. Those cliffs are like 500 metres or something. And then next day I went for a walk. It's unbelievable, the Faroe Islands. It's just all like that. We just went for a little walk here, and off here, that cliff was like 200 metres, absolute perfect vertical there. It was quite scary hanging out with people who are really comfortable around edges. Anyway, island, church. Faroese architecture. In fact, this is the only picture I put in of any sort of building, but it's basically all like this, or more beautiful. And then this island here, there's two families that live on it and run this farm. You can only get on and off it by helicopter, which is sort of like this weird old meets new farming thing. I think there is a really gnarly landing there, but they just do everything with a helicopter. So that's that, that's more stuff. That's called the witch's finger. Okay, right, this is actually from last year. Faroe Islands, I guess it's linking into what I was talking about with Mingulay. And some of these photos you might find a bit upsetting. It's basically the day after we arrived, we didn't actually see the slaughter, but we saw the sort of, we got there immediately after the Grin, which is this pilot whale hunt. And the most shocking thing about it for me, and I'm not pro-whaling, but the people that we talked to that day was like, there's this sort of cultural connection with nature, which is really uncomfortable for someone like me who lives in fluffy Cornwall, you know. And then you go out there and I don't know, I haven't had my perspective or my ideas about things changed in such a way as I did on this day. So, like, whaling is so rooted in their tradition, and on this day they killed 160 pilot whales. So it's a whole pod driven up a beach. But what's funny? Well, it's not that funny. None of it's funny. Basically, if you could explain it like this. You could say it's a non-profit, organic, community food harvest. And in the context of Cornish farmers market, you go, oh, that's lovely. You know? But then you go, yeah, it's Wales, and we all go. So anyway, watching the people do their thing was unbelievable, and the whole community was coming down to the harbour, and the way it works, someone saw this pod of whales coming in over the north end of Nullsoy, and they make a call to I think it was a mayor or some kind of councillor, and they say, oh, we've seen this big pod of whales, this is where they are. And then this council figure or whatever will either say, okay, we're going to do it, or no, we're not, it's too recent since the last one, whatever. So they make there is judgment, they don't just kill everything. And then the fastest means of communication now is Facebook. So they've got this massive Facebook group. And then the community, we met an IT consultant who was just at his desk, and then it's bing, down to his little boat. They're going out in 20-foot boats. Torshavn is weirdly similar scale to Falmouth, and it would be a bit like everyone just jumping in their little boats and dashing around to Gilling Bays, and then having another load of people on the beach in Gilling Bays, hiding behind the cafe. And they've got these weird spear saw things and hooks on a bit of string, and then they just guide the whales in little boats, 20-foot boats. And as they approach, they just start hitting the hulls like that, and then all the whales will beach. And then the guys run down the beach. They put the hook in the blowhole and sort of restrain them, and then they cut their spinal cord. But all the meat is, sorry, we'll move on from that, it's a bit much. That's a bit much as well. It's all a bit much. But, it's not, that photo just sort of cracks me up, really. It's a boy with a little cuddly sea turtle. But it makes me realise that this is so part of a culture. So I kind of follow what Sea Shepherd do, and I kind of value what they do, but I'm also really, really grateful to have had this sort of balancing view of that argument. It's not as simple as a lot of people make out, although some people would say it is. Anyway, whatever, food for thought. this is Nolsoy. This is my. I'm going to just put it out there and say it's one of my favourite places in the whole world. I've spent quite a lot of time there, waiting for weather opportunities. Actually, that Sherpa there. This is a little ferry that runs over to Tolmen, which is about there. The summit here on the south end of the island is 400 metres high, and then in these boulders here at the base of these cliffs is it's the biggest colony of storm petrels in the world. Live there, it's amazing. Anyway, went to also. This is the only llama in the Faroe Islands. This is a cod that we caught, and some weird fish with googly eyes that we were given by some weird furries dude. Eider ducks. If you're not into eider ducks, you should get into them. The Faroes' kind of premier taxidermist lives on North Side. He's called Jens Kjell. He's got this amazing little shop that fucking stinks. But that's a Manx shearwater. It's a black guillemot, my favourite sort of guillemot. This is a merlin. I've never seen one, but tiny bird of prey, sort of sea thing. Little wimbrel. Puffin. What's really funny is that he does quite a nice job of the taxidermy stuff, and then he puts in all these awful mounts. And it's like a drunk person putting lipstick on. It's so bad. But he's amazing, and I've been to see him 4 times over the last 2 years, and just talked loads about birds. He knows a lot. This is a Falmouth. They're all for sale. I sort of wish I'd bought it. This is the jawbones of a sperm whale that they got put up in the 1920s. Anyway, Nolsoy is great. So, yeah, we sat in Nolsoy, waited for weather. Actually, I'm just going to... What I haven't talked about is crushing doubt and anxiety. And through this whole journey, I'm going, shit, I've said I'm going to paddle around Iceland, and Iceland's massive and scary, and I'm going to do it on my own. And the south coast of Iceland is a nightmare for sea kayaking, and any mariner, actually, it's a nightmare. There's nothing there. And I'd been losing sleep over it for a long time, just thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And when we were in Faroes, basically the closer we got to Iceland, although we're doing all this cool stuff that's like taking my mind off it, I'm sort of running out of excuses because we're kind of getting close to Iceland. And we spent a few days in Northside waiting for weather, and I think if there had been like steady northerlies in the time that we were there, I would have pulled the cord and said, right, we're going back to Scotland. And I've almost like erased this bit from my sort of anecdotal memory of this trip, because I did go, and cool stuff did happen, bad stuff happened, and good stuff happened, but I think it's really important to remember that doubt, and remember the sort of getting over it. Anyway, we didn't get a northerly wind, we got a really solid, sort of southerly, it took us there really nicely, southeasterly kind of. It was like that most of the way, easy. Weird fog when we arrived, and then suddenly you're like, oh my god, I've sailed from Falmouth to this place, which was pretty mental. And yeah, so we got there, so we arrived at this place called Neskopstad, which is on the east coast. Up at the sort of head of the fjord here, this is a massive fish factory, and there's a sort of man-made harbour where there's a few pelagic trawlers are up there. And it's a huge sort of employer in the surrounding area of this fish factory. And then there was this tiny little small boat harbour where I was able to leave Sherpa whilst I went away kayaking. 50 quid a month. It's like, I mean, Iceland, you just get screwed for everything, money-wise, but as far as owning a boat out there, it's compared to here, it's just amazing. Amazing museum with like all the good stuff. Seabird eggs, love it. Love it, love it. Whale's teeth, amazing. Then we went for a walk. Love it. This is what happens when you go anywhere with Aidan and he's just like, what can I do that's just going to shit head up? So he does that and then he does that. And just going, I can't look. So this is Borkur. Iceland was amazing. As soon as we arrived, because they don't get many yachts up there, not in Neskopstad anyway, and literally within about 30 seconds, someone came up to me and was like, "Are you Ed?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, you've been chatting to my son, Ari, on Facebook." And I was like, and Ari was this guy who I hadn't met, but so I had a chat with him. And then this other guy called Hallie came up, and he was like, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm fine." He was like, "Anyway, you've arrived for the annual Fisherman's Festival, and here's the what's happening all weekend." And one of the things that was happening was everyone just piled on this boat and like ate chocolate and did a lap of the fjord. So we went out with them. And Hallie, he's the cook on this boat, and he became a real ally to me. Really kind of looked after me, but was there with this sort of. It was there's the most sort of really robust local knowledge where the captain of this ship was helping with my sort of weather planning. So like we were messaging, I'm out in the sticks, and he, he was like going, be careful, whatever. Boring story anyway. His friend is looking through binoculars again. It's like the Starship Enterprises thing. It's like amazing. There were so many cool things. Honestly, I could have put so many slides of all the cool stuff on this massive fishing boat. But I think the heated glove wrap. It's great. Anyway, this is Ari Benedict's son. A friend put us in contact, and he was just an absolute beauty. He made this kayak when he was 15. Didn't really know what he was doing, and he still got it. And he runs this kayak club. And he's sort of one of those people who's like really sort of sketchy and a bit awkward, but just lovely. This is his dad, who obviously is called Benedict, because it's Ari Benedict's son, with his boat, which is a Faroese boat, which I'd been kind of perving over a bit, because I was like, oh, that's a really nice boat. And then on this day, he'd just come down and was like, "So you're coming for dinner?" And I was like, "Am I?" And then when we went past it, he was like, "Oh, that's my boat." And I said, "Oh, so what I started to do was, I've then got to Iceland, but the doubt hasn't gone away. I'm still thinking I'm not good enough, what we're doing, and so I just thought I'm just going to behave like I'm going to do this. And part of that behaviour was like, I'm going to fill those 2 barrels that I bought with all the food that I bought and send them off to people. So one went to Reykjavik to this guy Gudni, and the other one went up to Isa Fjord in the northwest fjords to this amazing woman Vega, who's she's a fascinating person, sort of recent postdoc, transsexual, who is going to paddle around Iceland next year. She's great. So here's Iceland. This is Neskopstad is over here. Reykjavik. Where's Reykjavik? There. So that's where Gudni lives, and that's where Vega lives. Anyway, one day I just started. It was like, put everything in my boat. Sherpa's all right, and then I just there's no one there, and I just put my kayak in. And so this is the second time I've paddled in 6 months. And I was like, and as soon as I got going, it just felt great, and like all the stress just fell away, and it was like, just felt good. So I ended up here on my first night, which was really nice. Another amazing place. This was a horrible day that got me to this point, but just like living simply with very little, and just landing and getting on with it. And then this place, I'm not going to bore you with that hostel anyway. I ended up staying in this for a bit. This is the lighted up here. It's like living in the wreckage of that boat. Those are eggs. Anyway, I'd had this really scary experience, like pre-dawn, trying to leave through this tide race. Decided it was crazy, so I turned back and I'd landed on this weird, like, desolate spot. And it's actually quite close to a town by water, but by road it's really a long way around. And this orange thing is a rescue shelter. So I was sort of having decided to bail out on this crossing I was doing. I'd landed there and just went to sleep. And the next thing I knew, there was like all these science people who were coming to set up this radar system to monitor wave heights. So this big German guy came in and was like, "Oh, what are you doing in here?" And I was like, "What are you doing?" But I ended up hanging out with them all day. It was really nice. And then they told me that there was a whale down the beach, whale carcass down the beach, so I went and saw that, which was really cool. Anyway, I left there, really committing 32 nautical miles. So now I'm into the south coast section, which is this is the bit I've been worrying about. And so I got up really early, like 2 a.m. or something. 32 nautical miles. It's quite a long way. And got to this place, and this is like one of these massive, super popular, like, tourist places. They call it Diamond Beach. And I landed there, and I sort of thought, oh, it must be lovely, because everyone bangs on about this Diamond Beach. And basically there's this glacial lagoon, so glaciers come down and they carve icebergs into this lagoon, and then it's tidal, so they rush in and out of this small thing, small entrance. And I had planned to camp there, because I'd done this huge morning. And it's all like this, these massive things are like coming out, and it's like a river flowing out. And I'd sort of got in there on this eddy, and there's like transit van sized lumps of ice coming down, and I was like, oh, I really need to get off the water, this is nuts. But anyway, it's interesting going through these photos. That's a load of Arctic terns on an iceberg, and it all looks lovely. But so all these photos, I suddenly realised I've just done what everyone else has done there, which is frame out the 5,000 people that are probably on this site at this time, and the inflatable boat operations that are like dragging it around, just like queues of tourists waiting for like crap cups of coffee, and it was horrible. As soon as I got there, I was like, it was awful. And so these Arctic terns, they were the ones who like didn't have any eggs to sit on, so they're like, I'm going to go sit on that iceberg so I can get away from these assholes. But there's this huge Arctic tern nesting site, and on 3 sides it's bordered by car parks, And the whole thing was horrible. But having done this like really sketchy landing, I couldn't leave until the tide turned. So I just sat around eating couscous, and then finally at Slackwater, I paddled a big day already. But the next tenable landing site was 22 miles away, and I've never paddled that far in a day. But I hated it so much, I was like, I'm just going to do it. And so at Slackwater, I set off, and I'm paddling along, and it's just nothing. There's like, I don't know, it's just like this endless black sand, massive mountains, glaciers, all this stuff, and no sort of visual references to go, oh, I'm just going to like paddle to that log or whatever, it's just. And then I saw this rock that was right on my compass bearing, and I thought, oh, that's lucky. There's a rock a couple of miles away, so I'll just paddle to that rock, and then I'll like stop and eat some chocolate, whatever. And then I was paddling for an hour, and then I suddenly realised that this rock that I was aiming for was actually the island that I was aiming for. That was 20 miles away. It was just really tiny. So finally landed there at this place called Inglesby, and it was just so amazing. technically it's a headland, not an island. It's linked to the mainland by 6 kilometres of black sand, these like endless sand flats. And then sort of out to the southeast and round to the sort of southwest is open water. West of here is just like glacial delta and like these mad like glacial rivers. And so I'm actually only, like at this point, I'm only 7 kilometres from the main highway from Reykjavik. But the accessibility of it just makes it feel, it's just amazing. So loads of farmers living on these cliffs, which is great. Puffins living in the top up there. And that's just like wind-blown sand up there. Oh yeah, so this gives you an idea of the geography. That there is the sort of island. And this is all just sand forever. And then, so these are glacial rivers, and you can see here, they just dump out sediment into the water. So for quite a long way offshore, all around here, there's like really shallow water, breaking waves and stuff. So to move on from here, you have to get into deep water to get away from the woods. More on which later. Yeah, this is, so Ingleshelby's there, these crazy rivers. Essentially, if you land anywhere here, you're screwed, because you can't get vehicles to you. The only way out is helicopter. So I had to paddle from there. The next best landing was here, which is like another 34 miles. And then I got there, and then the weather just crapped out. And I was like, there's no way that I'm going to do this 34-mile crossing unless I'm feeling fairly confident about it. So anyway, this is still the first night. Watched the sunset. This is like my ghetto lifestyle on the beach. And then the next morning I walked up, and there's a guy called Einar, and his grandfather set up this business with an old tractor and a trailer, and they bring tourists out across the sand flats. They own in fact they own all the sand flats, and they're farmers, and they bring tourists out to just see the puffins. So my friend Goodney in Reykjavik, he's like watching my tracker and stuff, and he saw that I'd landed there, and he'd emailed Einar and said, "Oh, this British kayaker has landed on the Cape." So I was up on the island, and Einar had come out, and he'd obviously been looking out for me. So these crazy lines here were the tractor coming to check out my little tent. And yeah, it's just, and the scale is just nuts. This is the oldest emergency refuge in Iceland that was built in response to a shipwreck where 6 German sailors lost their lives they went ashore, they went aground, and they actually survived the wreck, but they just starved and died of exposure. And so this was built. This is actually Einar, and this is them after a guillemot egg collecting session. Again, this goes back, you sort of think about eating seabirds' eggs, and you just think, oh, why are you eating seabirds' eggs? Because they're all little guillemots. But something that we might find slightly squeamish, I've actually come to really respect. It's about a connection with nature. They all know exactly when this sweet spot is a very narrow, sort of like a couple of weeks really, where you can collect the eggs at the right point. So this was my life for a week. I just kind of hung out in here and read books and slept and wandered around the island. It's covered in great skewers, which are, I've always had a bit of an issue with great skewers, because whenever you wander around, they just like go for your head. But I came to really love them on the island, and got to know them, and I'd sort of, as I was wandering around, I'd talk to them and go, "Hi, Skewer, hi, Skewer." And when I finally met Einar after a week, we had chats going, "Oh, you know that one that's just like on that bit path by the lighthouse? You know that really Larry one?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, we call her Grandma." So he's been going out there his whole life, and he knows the birds. And I spent a week living there. No, I only got that opportunity because technically I was shipwrecked or cast away or whatever. It's forbidden to stay in those huts unless you have a valid reason. So it was just like amazing opportunity. There's great skewer eggs. this is these mega bird clips, loads of puffins showing off. Puffins get so much credit. I'm still not convinced that they're actually not just little kind of robots invented by Chinese fluffy toy manufacturers to just like peddle shit that we don't need. But anyway, they are quite funny when they fly. In the hut there was this massive net which is for hunting puffins. So I did quite a bit of that, like without success. Went around the island catch puffins. This is Einar's tractor. Came out once a day, sometimes twice a day with a bunch of tourists. And then this is I just went for this huge, well, I went for a lot of walks actually, but everything on this beach is like sandblasted, really amazing. And you know, like this barrel is just like paper thin, where it's just been hammered. And this is a bit of whale jaw. It's just littered with like whale bits and timber and fishing stuff and loads of stuff. So I've called this talk, what do I call it? Seabirds, Solitude and the Sublime. My understanding, I've kind of made up my own definition of what sublime is, but for me it's a kind of this idea of a beauty that is overwhelming. It's like, it's too big almost, and uncomfortable, you know. And I had several experiences on this trip where the bigness of it and the beauty of it, and sometimes it was a sort of desolate beauty, was just so moving, and particularly being on my own, it was like this total sort of, I don't know, it's like you're kind of emotionally unwrapped by this, the scale of it. And so I walked out, and I walked about halfway to the mainland, and there's this single outcrop of rock, and I climbed up it, and I just burst into tears, and it was just went on and on, you know. So this is the island looking to the south, and then this is looking out to the west over these miles of sand. And then to the north, you've got the mountains. Anyway.
Is that the sea in the background?
So that's the sea. This is like looking back sort of northeast. So yeah, then it got pretty, it got pretty wild. That's why I wasn't moving. So I waited and waited. Puffins in really strong winds, quite funny. My kayak got sort of half buried. That's a bit of. I should put that here. This was the nicest bit of kind of whale bone that I could actually fit in the hatch of my kayak. So that came with me. Kayak for the living in the heart. Blah blah blah. Okay, and then this was. I'm finally looking at this weather. I've still got 4G out here, which is pretty cool. And I saw this opportunity, and there's still this swell running. But I thought I kind of identified that there was this 36-hour window that I needed to do 75 miles to get to this place called Vic, and then I'd kind of broken the back of what's basically the crux move of trying to circumnavigate Iceland. And so this was the day before, and I'm looking at it just going, oh, that's super sketchy, but if I can get out through the surf, maybe I'm alright. So I was watching it loads. I don't know if you can see here, this brown water here, there's a little bit of a sort of weird rip thing going on there, and then there's like little rips running out down. So I've launched up in the corner here, and I managed to work my way down here, and I sort of used the rip to get out. And so this was sunset the night before, and then I think I was afloat at 2:30 in the morning or something. And I really like this picture because basically getting out through the surf was super sketchy. First time was a bit of a disaster, turned out nearly bailed, and then I went for it again. But you can see the water's oily calm, but there's still this sort of swell running. but it was forecast the wind was forecast to stay alright, so I was like, right, I'm going to do it, and anyway, I paddled for about 3 hours, and like I was saying earlier, I went a long way offshore to just stay away from these shoals, and then I was some way from land, and then the wind started picking up, basically, and it was really sudden, and it was much more than it was forecast. And so what I tend to do in that situation is, it's like a bit of admin, because it's like, okay, this is getting a bit serious, so I was like, I'm going to eat, I'm going to drink, and I'm going to have a pee. And so in my dry suit, I've got a zip in my dry suit, so I drank, managed to have a pee, but before I got my dry suit zipped up, but before I got my spray deck on, I had 2 waves just filled the boat with water, and doesn't mean I sink, I've still got buoyancy in the ends, but the cockpit was full of water, so I probably got like 60 kilos of water in the boat, and tried pumping it out, but just before I made any progress, it was like filled up again. Tried all sorts of things, and it was, I guess it was like top end of 5, force 5, something like that. So the waves are starting to crumble. It was just awful. And I didn't even have to think. It was like, I am going back. There is no way that I can sustain this for another like 10 hours. So I just paddled back with a boat full of water. And after an hour and a half or something, it mellowed out enough for me to empty the boat. Anyway, I finally made it back onto the beach, and I was just wrecked, like completely crushed, sort of mentally and physically just wrecked. And I had like millions of missed calls on my phone from people who'd been following my tracker, and what I didn't even realise was, so I had this little satellite tracker thing, but what I didn't realise is that almost as soon as I paddled away from the island at like 3 in the morning, I'd gone into this sort of satellite black spot, so I'd kind of disappeared, and even if I'd got in trouble, if I'd hit the like, come and get me button, nothing would have happened, but anyway, yeah, I landed back on the beach. I had all these messages on my phone, I just ignored everything. And yeah, it's fun. And then, so this little bit, it's maybe a little bit morbid, but what I saw this whole summer in all these places was like for every creature that I saw alive, I saw a dead version of it. So this is a dead gannet. This is a fulmer's egg that's at the base of the cliffs. Like the fulmer's breeding pair will lay 1 egg a year, and this has just been like, oops, you know. It's like, oh no. There's a dead fulmer. That's a grey, what is that? Great skua egg. I could be lying, but you believe me. That's some sort of like grey lag goose or something. Arctic tern eggs, puffin. But I found this quote the other day, and it's so I've been thinking a lot about what I witnessed on this journey was like this struggle for life in nature. Like there's this sort of absolute vitality to it, of this simple and defined purpose of stay alive and lay an egg, and raise the chick, and then this cycle that just goes on and on and on. And it sort of puts all your own stuff into perspective, but what's interesting, from a kayak, you experience all of that vulnerability yourself and all of that exposure, but you also engage in that struggle, and it's a sort of just very simple struggle of just stay alive, and it's terrifying, but there's this vibrancy to it that is kind of extraordinary. Anyway, so this is a book. Actually, I wouldn't recommend you read this book. I think the guys have gone off on one a bit. But, found this nice quote. When Hugh MacDermott wanted an epigraph for a poem on finding a bird skull, a scene he decided to place on the Atlantic shore of South Uist, he famously quoted a line from an old Spanish play: "The dead open the eyes of the living, and I don't know what I'm going to say about that. But yeah, sorry, that went a bit cosmic, and I haven't had enough to expand. Anyway, let's go on with it. So Einar saw me arrive back on the beach. When I turned my phone, one of the messages I got from him, he just put Godspeed, because someone had given me his number. And he basically thought I was mental for trying that day. I think he'd seen a different weather forecast. Anyway, he just came over in the tractor, and he's got this tractor full of Japanese tourists who are like, oh, puffins. And there's this broken, sea kayak on the beach, and I was like, just leave all your stuff there and just come back to the mainland. So I went back, stayed with him and his family, who were just amazing people. I had my 39th birthday. This is my last bit of fruitcake that my dear mother has made for me. And this is the tractor. That's Einar. He's just so amazing. What I found interesting about Einar, the sort of text saying Godspeed was then put into context when I spent time with him and his family, and they're sort of born-again Christians, really committed. But Einar was born again when he did this winter journey across Iceland. He skied from the West Fjords down to the southeast in winter, crossing all the mountains and stuff with this other guy. And then they were in this remote cabin in the middle of nowhere, in the northern winter, in this storm. And he had this experience where he believes that he saw the devil, and it was all a bit crazy, but I don't subscribe to his sort of ideology, but I don't think it's a coincidence that we've both shared these experiences of bigness. So anyway, that's Einar. Interestingly, actually, Einar's wife, she was like, "Is it okay if we pray for you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it actually really went on for quite a long time. It was like 25 minutes of kind of, "Dear God, Jesus our Saviour," but last year in Nova Scotia, it was the only other time that anyone else had prayed for me, was just before I paddled the Bay of Fundy, which is the biggest tidal range in the world. So, note to self, if you want to get prayed for, go and do something scary. So there's my kayak, it's quite convenient to take it apart, and it fits between poles and the trailer. Stuck it in his Land Rover, which was pretty badass. And then I made this decision. I thought, I'm not going to give up on this journey. But the weather was awful, consistent crappy forecast. So I thought, I'm going to make my way back to the East Coast. I had a load of repairs to do on Sherpa, and but I had to spend a night in this place called Hook, and I stayed there, and one of the tent poles on my tent had broken, and I was travelling with an IKEA bag, and I basically just felt like this tramp. But having spent, having this total sort of autonomy in what I do, suddenly I was subject to bus timetables and queues for a toilet and stuff like that, and it was horrible. So I got back to Sherpa, and I'm just looking at weather. I don't know if any of you use Windy, but basically pinks and oranges is force 8, force 9. This is 6s and 7s. Ingolstavi is there, and I'm going this way. So it was just oh God, give me a break. So Whitney, let's talk about Whitney. Whitney started as an ironic thing. I'm not going to give you that story because we'll be here all night, but I Want to Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston sort of accidentally was playing at the renaming ceremony of Sherpa, and it sort of just stuck. And I don't know how to tell Whitney's story. Anyway, so I love Whitney Houston. I love I Want to Dance by Whitney Houston. And when I came back, I was like, right, I'm going to just do all this stuff, get all this work done on Sherpa, sort her out. And I didn't. I just ate hot dogs and chocolate milk and felt drank chocolate milk and felt really sorry for myself. And I was like, oh, poor me, the weather's so shit. And then, so I was like, I'm going to listen to some Whitney to make myself feel better. So I listened to loads of Whitney on YouTube. And then it was like, before I knew it, I was watching Kevin Costner's speech about her at her funeral. All 17 minutes of it. And sobbing. So why? But there's... Kevin Costner tells a story about Whitney when she was casting for The Bodyguard. There's a story where she was about to come out of her trailer to do the screen test, and then she went, just give me a minute. So she goes back into her trailer, and they're like, oh, what's she doing? I don't know. Anyway, she comes out again, and they do the screen test, and she gets under the lights, and what she's done, she wasn't happy with the makeup that they put on her, so she cleaned it all off and put her own makeup on, which wasn't stage makeup, and so she got under the lights, and the whole lot just went on her face. And but Kevin Costner talks about her, and she suffered from this thing of feeling like she wasn't good enough, and it's like Whitney bloody Houston thought she wasn't good enough, and I think maybe some people think they are good enough. Anyway, found that quite inspiring. This is Hallie. He's the chef on the trawler. He's really cool. He tried to distract me by taking me on a road trip to see stuff that does that and things like that. I got this text from him 2 days ago. They were just on Beaucourt. They'd been out in the southwest, and so that's that big fishing trawler. This is on Tuesday. They were just here. That's Inglesby with 2,000 tons of herring on board. And he was like, oh, look where I am. Nice one, mate. This is Goodney. Oh, right, so what happened? Sorry, is everyone all right with this? There's quite a lot of smiling. Anyway, what happened? Eventually, I was like, the weather was just continuing to be rubbish. That South Coast section, no one was getting around it this summer. And I just had to make this decision, like, I've waited 3 weeks, the forecast for the next 10 days is still rubbish. What do I do? And so I've been in contact with Goodney, which we'd never met, but he was like, look man, just come to Reykjavik, and then we'll drive out, we'll collect your boat, and you can restart your trip from Reykjavik, and there's a bit more shelter there, so you can be a bit more opportunistic about taking really short weather windows. So anyway, we do all that, fly to Reykjavik, me and Goodney drive down to Einar's farm, pick up my kayak, and then stayed a night with him. He gave me a tour of his freezer, which was incredible. Those are, I think, are guillemots. He had like goose, guillemots, puffin, reindeer, all sorts of stuff, animals. And then me and Goodney paddled for 1 day together from Reykjavik to just north of this place called Akranes, and I was going to aim to complete my circumnavigation from there, having missed about 200 miles. And we had this really weird thing. We were crossing a fjord, and we paddle ahead of this boat, and this is a whaling ship, and it was just like this incredible freedom of a trip where you haven't had to sort of interface with like airports and stuff like that. I just like packed and like had my breakfast and did the washing up, and then sort of went, oh, I'm ready, and then just slipped my bag into the water and went. So this was end of the first day, little campsite down there. It's really nice. There were loads of seals in here, which was cool. And then this became a bit of a theme of like, I went super light, so I didn't have I was a bit short on. I had one set of spare clothes, but it was really wet for the first few days. But you end up being really precious about your dry ones, and you're like, oh, I don't want to get them wet. So I spent quite a lot of time naked on the beach, trying to dry one set of clothes and preserve my other ones. So I'm like wandering around with no clothes on, like this total weirdo. My clothes drying around fires. Shetland is amazing. The whole coast has just like got holes in it everywhere, which is brilliant in the kayak because you can go through them. This is Papastour. Ended up. Basically, there's another island off here and a bit here, and I was like, oh, should I go through there or should I go through there? And then as I got up to it, I was like, oh, I'm just going to go through the island. which actually turned out to be a really bad idea because there's a tide race in there and it's super sketchy and anyway, another nice place, me naked again, drying clothes, another nice place, more stuff with holes in it, another nice place, I might have had clothes, I'm not sure, probably not. Empty beaches, amazing. And then, so I'd read about this place in a book, which I'll read about shortly, Lighthouse Stevenson's, called Muckleflugger. Now, Muckleflugger is, it's this gnarly rocky island off the north end of Unst. The only bit of British land beyond Muckleflugger is this just sort of like rocky protrusion called Outstack. And anyway, I'd seen this, I'm paddling along and I was like, oh, there's Muckleflugger, and then I realised, and I'm looking at the weather and it was like, if I really go for it, I could potentially land there. So I did 3 really massive days and I pushed north and I got there. And I'm just like thinking, Muckleflugger, 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 and I knew nothing about the fact that I was actually going past one of the biggest gannet colonies in the British Isles, former. And so this is the cliffs at Hermaness. It was just mental. That's a great skewer hassling out this lot for food. And it's kind of like, if you're not into bird watching, you just need to go there and then you'll be into it. It's just crazy. There's like 30,000 birds live on this cliff. You do have to put your hood up when you're in a kayak. But anyway, it's great. This is Muckleflugger. The white here on the rocks is actually, that's gannets. So there's loads of them live there as well. And yeah, I use Google Maps a lot to look at stuff, and I'd looked at this and seen this here and figured that was a staircase, so I was like, that's where I'm going to land. And I get there and there's like, so that lighthouse was completed in 1857 and this is all the original landing stages from that time. These steps were like cut into the rock, built by the Stevenson family. Robert Louis Stevenson was the famous one for writing books, but actually all his all his sort of father, grandfather, uncle, great uncle, all that lot, they were the pioneer lighthouse builders. And so there's all these rusting remains of cool stuff that was built in the 19th century, which was amazing. So I managed to land there, and it was great, rusty cool stuff. And that's Outstack. And this is my spot at the base of the lighthouse tower, helipad. Stuff like I really can't understate how pleasing it is when you just get a handrail. Falmouth chicks. So this is a nice experience where suddenly I've seen the breeding season and I've seen it when they're incubating, and then you see the chicks, and so in this small way I'm starting to like mesh in with their system, or their pattern. That's Outstack. And then did lots of swimming off here and jumping out. It was cool. Interestingly, this was built by the Stevensons in the 19th century, bomb-proof. This was put up by someone in the 20th century, and it's all fallen apart. So that's cool. It's definitely the sort of place where you can understand why people want to leave them up. Fulmer. So that's Muckleflugger, Fulmer. Anyway, so paddled on, and this is on the backside of Nos, which was another just like birdie paradise. It's great. I'm going to drink the water or something. All right. So I want to share a quote with you, and this is from this amazing book that inspired me to go to Muckleflugger. And Robert Louis Stevenson, he wrote a lot about his family's sort of activity as lighthouse builders. And he wrote a book called The Education of an Engineer. And in this quote, he describes this sort of balance between like adventure and the kind of the mundane or sort of excitement and responsibility, and where he puts himself on that where the lighthouse builder is on that spectrum. And I've always loved this, and it's something that I really relate to. Of it's like just trying to find your sweet spot. So it goes like this. It takes a man into the open air. It keeps him hanging about harbour sides, which is the richest sort of idling. It carries him to wild islands. It gives him a taste of the genial dangers of the sea. It supplies him with dexterities to exercise. It makes demands upon his ingenuity. It will go far to cure him of any taste, if he ever had one, for the miserable life of cities. And when it has done so, it carries him back and shuts him in an office. From the roaring skerry and the wet thwart of the tossing boat, he passes to the stool and desk. And with a memory full of ships and seas and perilous headlands and the shining Faroes, he must apply his long-sighted eyes to the petty niceties of drawing, or measure his inaccurate mind with several pages of consecutive figures. He is a wise youth, to be sure, who can balance one part of genuine life against two parts of drudgery between four walls, and for the sake of the one, manfully accept the other. So, I love that. I guess I struggle a bit because I'm probably better adapted to doing this stuff than maybe normal life sometimes. And so I don't know, I find a lot of comfort when I find something in a text that was written 100 years ago or whatever, which reflects how I feel. So that's what Louis Stevens said. More birds, doing cool stuff. Gannets. This is great skewers, right? They are just assholes. What they do is they're called kleptoparasites, which basically means they don't hunt their own food. They just bully other birds for their food. So they're always in amongst the gannets, and they'll work as teams to force a gannet down to the water and make it regurgitate food so they can eat it. So whilst there's all this drama going on with the gannets, in amongst it there's these teams of great skewers, and it's amazing. I did actually come to love them. They're really big, fat, clumsy birds on the ground, but when you see them in flight, it's amazing. There's another one up there. It's very cool. This is a fin whale on Nos. It was stranded, and then these guys put it in. This is an Arctic tern having a really good go at some great skewers, which I found quite pleasing because they're really funny. And then he's going down not having it, but they didn't seem that bothered. They were just and then there's this tiny little sort of one-room museum, which just got all the cool stuff in it. Loads of eggs. I mean, why aren't all museums just like that? Anyway, love it. That's baleen from a minke whale. Really annoyingly, I was told that 2 weeks earlier this pod of killer whales had swam up through there hunting seals. Everywhere I went, people were like, "Oh, you should have been in last week. There was a pod of killer whales." So there's two bird enthusiast conservation guys live in this place, which is cool. So I left here, and then all I'm thinking is fish and chips, because I was going to go to Scalloway, and I'm never going to eat couscous again. But yeah, fish and chips. And I'm I've seen loads of birds, and I've seen been to this museum, and it's all amazing. And so fish and chips. And I'm paddling along under this cliff, and I was tucked in really tight to stay out of the wind. And then directly in front of me, this otter sea otter bursts out of the water with a ghillie knot in its mouth, and it sort of sprang out of the water, jumps up onto this rocky ledge, and it's kind of 2 meters away from me, and I was and the otter's and then it sort of scampered one way and there was nowhere to go, and then it scampered the other way and there was nowhere to go there, and then it sort of just and then it opened its mouth, and then the ghillie knot was I'm off. And the ghillie knot just went for it, swam off, and then the otter. So they basically disappeared under my boat, and I was just left there fish and chips. So this is Lerwick. You're in a good place when that's what the tourist centre is like. And then I had to really push it to get around Sunborough Head. It didn't look that scary, but actually the tides I feel were pretty mental. And I was like scraping my paddle blade against the rocks pretty much to stay right in to get out of a load of nonsense. This is cooking dinner on St Ninian's Isle. And this is where I anchored Sherpa on the day that we crossed from Faroe, so it was really nice. A Sherpa. And then, this was really nice. So I got back and I was like, oh, brilliant, I'm going to have a few days off. And I got back and I looked at the weather, and so I completed this trip at like midday or something, and went for a massive lunch, and I'm just like, oh, I'm going to rest. Just eat, and I'm looking at the weather, and it was basically like, to go to mainland Scotland, it was like, either leave at 5 AM tomorrow morning, or be stormbound for like 8 days. So I was like, oh. So I finished my lunch, and then I just went back and got Sherpa ready to go to sea again, and then at dawn the next day I was off. That makes this trip look really nice. It was actually full on. Went through 2 really big electrical storms, like really strong winds, a bit crazy. Got around Cape Wrath, and then anchored in this place called Ardmore, which was great. And it's home to a guy called John Ridgway, who he's done loads of amazing stuff. In 1966, he rode across the Atlantic, the proper route, Cape Cod to Ireland, in a 20-foot open boat with a guy called Che Bly. And they went through a hurricane, and it was just completely total sufferfest, but they did that. And then he competed in the Golden Globe race, which probably a lot of you are familiar with. But he got as far as Brazil and had to bail out because his boat was really damaged. And anyway, he lives in this remote part of northwest Scotland. The nearest you can get to their house by car is like a 45-minute walk away from where they live, or you show up by boat. And this is it. This boat here is called English Rose 6. It's John Ridgway sailed this boat 3 times around the world, and then they went on a family holiday, which was like 18 months via the Galapagos and the Antarctic and Pacific Rim and like loads of cool places. But I just thought, I'm just going to walk up and bang on the door, so I did. And I ended up spending the day with him, which was amazing. And this chart here is a chart for the Southern Indian Ocean, and he's used the same chart for all 3 circumnavigations. And this stuff here was in 1978. They did the Whitbread round the world race, and they were their tactic was to take the Great Circle route and go so far south that they'd do a shorter distance than everyone else. So they sailed off the chart down here, and they were like 60 degrees south or something like that. And but they misjudged it slightly because they got stuck in pack ice, and then everyone overtook them. But he was in a real fuss about this chart fading, because he'd only recently put it up because he wanted to look at it. And so I helped him hang this curtain rail that Mary Christine was going to sew some curtains up for. And here, you can't see it because the reflection is a really beautiful print of a Ridgway's petrel, which he'd been given for his 80th birthday a couple of weeks earlier. And this is a trophy for their participation in the 1978-79 Whitbread round the world race. But I hung out with him. Here's his chart, it's like great, all the plots and everything. Trophy. It's just great. Loves fishing. This is a reading list that he let me take a picture of called Some Books Which Helped Form My Life, which I thought it's quite interesting because I sort of do that as well. You know, it's like it becomes part of your sort of own cultural narrative of the books that you read and the bits that stick. You know, so this is all his. I spent all day with them and stayed for lunch. And but what was interesting, this guy who, in my eyes, is an absolute badass. And we talked about the struggle, and he unprompted by me, started talking about the struggle, and I knew exactly what he meant. And we talked a lot about doubt, and we talked about how to, a lot of the things that I've talked about tonight, I suppose. And for me that was sort of very reassuring to sort of meet someone who I sort of really look up to and have that sort of response. So this is, yeah, they packed me off. I had this lovely day with them, and then they sent me off with some freshly baked scones and some of Mary Christine's raspberry jam, and John's book called Non-Stop Around the World, and in the front of it he'd written, "Dear Ed, this is the sort of thing you might enjoy, and not too costly once you're underway. It's from John." And, so that's really nice. This is their house. So we've got, on this photo here, this is English Rose 6. English Rose 3 is the boat that he tried to do the Golden Globe on. And in a shed over here is whatever English Rose it was that he rode the Atlantic in. And I was quite inspired by the fact that he had this really clear sense of place. It's not like he conjures up this trip and gets a load of sponsorship dosh and goes and starts it in front of the TV cameras. He, like when he sailed non-stop around the world with this guy Andy Briggs, English Rose 6 was on her mooring in this sea lock, and it was really narrow getting in there. And they just dropped the mooring and they ghosted out, tacking out of the thing. And then they went and sailed all the way around the world, and then they sailed back into the sea lock and picked up their mooring and then rowed ashore and had a party at home. And I think there's a lot of people who, there's this sort of culture of adventure where it's quite showy, and he's not that, and I have just really utmost respect for the way that he's done the journeys that he has. So anyway, Northwest Scotland, I don't know why, but the Northwest Highlands, whenever I've been there, it always does this weird light effect where it's sort of stacking. It's not a great picture, but it's nice. So then I'm just getting on now. This is the Shan Islands. Really beautiful, amazing bird colonies there. You should go if you can. School got quite hectic. And then I'm going along, and I'm nearly at this little island, and then I had to tack out of the way because there was a submarine coming down. Anyway, so this is, what's the island called? Scalpay. I've been there a few times, I love it. And I got chat this guy Donald, this is his fishing boat here, and when I'd gone ashore in the dinghy, I'd had a chat with him. We had a really nice chat for like half an hour, and then I went back to Sherpa, and next thing I know, he's like knocking on the side going, "Would you like a lobster for your tea?" Yes, I would. So I ate it, that's delicious. And then I'm heading north. Anyway, worked my way down, had to go to Oban to do some repairs, met this really annoying guy who ripped me off, but fixed my rigging, which is cool. And then this little place here is called Lockspell, and I sort of quite fancied it because it was completely landlocked, where you go into this narrow entrance. And I'd seen this weather forecast, basically 0 wind for a couple of days, and then southerlies. So I was like, well, that's a bit rubbish for trying to get home on, so I'm going to paddle around Mull. So anchored Sherpa in Lockspell, and got my kayak, and that was like a 110-mile circumnavigation, did it in 4 days. It's absolutely amazing. Oh yeah, and then I found this on the beach. Message in a bottle. My name's Owen Danforth. I live in Ireland, Downings. I am 9 years old. I love football. I sort of didn't clock the Downings bit when I first read it, and then I thought it was like his name or something, and then I was like, Downings Island. Google. I was like, oh, there's a Downings Island. So I just Googled Downings Island pub. It comes up with a pub. And then I emailed the pub going, found this message in the bottle. Do you know someone called Owen Danforth? And I was like, I found this message in the bottle. He's 9 years old and loves football, and I think his mum likes Sauvignon Blanc. And they went, oh yeah, and then I ended up having some really nice sort of Facebook chat with his mum. It was really nice. If I'd got the weather for it, I would have gone to Downings, but as it was, I didn't get it. So just simple life, hiking, absolutely great, beautiful, lovely, great. Another little paddle all around, nice place. This is supposed to be the only bridge across the Atlantic, but there's one in Faroes, there's one on Skye. Don't believe the hype. And then, basically, it's sort of, I'm rattling through a little bit, but I'll try and just get to the crux of it. Time. Oh God, I've banged on for ages. Basically, finally I'm going home, and there's this thing that I've felt before, where it's this sort of like profound feeling of just like, I get it. I just get it. Like everything, you know. I don't know. It's just this sort of beautiful thing where I guess you almost feel like you've got some sort of profound, you've discovered some like universal truth, and like everything's going to be amazing. But you start, I guess it's like annoying people who are like, oh, I've just been on my gap year, and you know. As I sort of was coming down the RSC, I don't really like the RSC anyway, so it's not the most shiny place, but suddenly I just felt it was like the trip ended before I got home in some ways, because I sort of knew it was like, that's it now. This is kind of workman-like, just getting back. And I'm sort of reminded by this quote from, this amazing book called The Way of the World by Nicolas Bouvier. Two men in a car from Geneva to the Khyber Pass, did it in the 1950s. And he travelled with his mate, and then his mate had to go back to Switzerland to work, and he completed this trip alone and drove this car. It's like basically a Fiat 500, really battered little car, up over the Khyber Pass. And he wrote this, and it's like that feeling that I got when I was sailing down the Irish Sea, the feeling that I've never found the words for, he managed to find the words for. And it's kind of bittersweet, because the feeling is, you know, it's like you've had all this excitement, you know, you've had this incredible experience, and sort of reality bites. So he wrote this: that day I really believed that I had grasped something, and that henceforth that day I really believed that I had grasped something, and that henceforth my life would be changed. But insights cannot be held forever. Like water, the world ripples across you, and for a while you take on its colours. Then it recedes and leaves you face to face with the void you carry inside yourself, confronting that central inadequacy of soul which you must learn to rub shoulders with and to combat, and which paradoxically may be our surest impetus. And yeah, it's a bit bleak, but kind of beautiful as well. So actually, I had quite a gnarly crossing. Got down, it was pretty windy coming up to Land's End. So coming over Cape Cornwall Bank, like I had waves, two waves crashed completely over the boat, like breaking waves over the boat, and then got sort of, you know, got around Land's End, jibed, and then the wind started to sort of moderate, but I was just flying, and came over this bit called the Epsom Shoal south of Gwennap, and you get these mad A-frame waves, and the shelter's just like, it was absolutely great, and this beautiful moon that was just lovely. And then this is sort of, I think I was around the Lizard, and you start seeing the ships at anchor like out of Falmouth. And then I was around Manacles Bay, and this was the sunrise on the morning that I came back, and then get home. So, right, you can all relax. I'm going to stop talking in there. I'm going to hit you up with another slightly bleak quote. It's not all bleak. This is from the great book called The Peregrine by J.A. Baker, and he wrote this, which I came back to Falmouth, and it's this place where I first moved here 20 years ago, and I've moved away a couple of times, but it is my home, and this is where my friends are. But somehow, when I got back and the anchor chain was like rattling out of the bow roller, I felt like I'd sort of left home rather than just arrived at it. because for those months that I was away, for all the hardship, for all the crying, watching Kevin Costner talk about Whitney and me covered in chocolate milk, and for all the all the kind of out there in Iceland thinking, please don't die, please don't die, and all of that, it was just amazing. It was this profound sense of purpose that I do. That's kind of why I do it, I suppose. So arriving home was difficult, and so the Peregrine, J.A. Baker, he wrote this: "I've always longed to be part of the outward life, to be out there at the edge of things, to let the human taint wash away in emptiness and silence as the fox sloughs his smell into the cold unworldliness of water, to return to the town as a stranger, wandering flushes of glory that fades with arrival." And it was sort of all those sort of feelings going on. Anyway, then I rowed ashore, walked up the hill, went and had breakfast at Providore, which was delicious. Drank way too much coffee and got really jittery. So, I'm going to wrap it up now. I've talked about how when I go on these trips, I go with the people that inspire me. I go with the people that have gone before. And I go with all my own ambition and whatever. Last year when I was on Barrow, I was lent The Worst Journey in the World by Apsley Cherry Garron by Ben, who is the guy who lives out on that caravan at Cleatch on the west coast that I showed you. And he lent me this book and he was like, "Dude, you need to read this." And so it's an account of Scott's final expedition to the pole, but it's actually about that whole expedition. And in the winter of 1911, so this is a few months before Scott went off to make his attempt on the South Pole, there was this little side project, which was these three men went to it was Edward Wilson, Henry Bowers, and actually Jerry Garrett, did this unbelievable journey, which has become known as the worst journey in the world, out to this emperor penguin colony at Cape Crozier, and to collect emperor penguin eggs, because they believed that there was this missing link. If they studied the embryos, which they could only get in winter, that they would discover this missing link between modern birds and dinosaurs. So anyway, they did this trip. It was just horrific. I don't know how they got away with it. It was down to minus 60 Celsius. They were shivering so much they shattered their teeth. And they basically got PTSD from it. The other two guys ended up dying alongside Scott on the pole, on the journey to the pole. And actually, Joe Garrett, it took him 10 years to sort of get over it to a point where he could write this book. But for all that suffering, this book tells the story of the whole journey. And there's this bit which actually is they're describing when they were sailing south to the pole. They got caught in this Southern Ocean storm. And there's this beautiful bit which I think sort of captures, what am I trying to say? Yeah, don't get distracted by all the scary stuff and all the suffering, because it's just, even when it's really scary and painful and uncomfortable, this guy Priestley wrote in his diary of this Southern Ocean storm, "If Dante had seen our ship as she was at her worst, I fancy he would have got a good idea for another circle of hell. He would have been at a loss to account for such a cheerful and ribald lot of souls." So it's kind of, I've read some bleak stuff. It's kind of, actually, when you're out there doing it, that feeling of engagement and purpose and all that stuff is powerful. So anyway, when I got back from Nova Scotia last year, as a homage to them, I made 3 ceramic emperor penguin egg piggy banks, and I've kept one for myself. I sent one to Ben. So this is his caravan on Barra. This is a skeleton of a seal. These are sea beans, which are it's basically a tropical seed pod from a palm or something. So they cross the Atlantic and he picks them up on boats. He's got loads of cool, but you've sent it to the right person when they send you a picture going, "Oh, here's my egg and all my other cool stuff." And the other one was to this girl Mia, who lives in Arctic Norway, with a whale tooth, the stuff puffing and whatever that other stuff is. So I'm going to end with the last couple of paragraphs from The Worst Journey in the World, because, you know, I'm sort of out of words. It's just, I think it just explains why there's sort of no point to doing all this stuff, but also it's like absolutely essential. And so you actually check, what's his name? Sherry Garrett writes this. And I tell you, if you have the desire for knowledge and the power to give it physical expression, go out and explore. If you are a brave man, you will do nothing. If you are fearful, you may do much, for none but cowards have need to prove their bravery. Some will tell you that you are mad, and nearly all will say, what is the use? For we are a nation of shopkeepers, and no shopkeeper will look at research which does not promise him a financial return within a year. And so you will sledge nearly alone, and those with whom you sledge will not be shopkeepers, and that is worth a good deal. If you march your winter's journey, you will have your reward, so long as all you want is a penguin's egg. And there it is, that's on display in the Natural History Museum. Amazing. Anyway, that's me. Thank you very much.